Imagine a solitary fortress, surrounded by deserts and mountains, bravely resisting the onslaught of one of the greatest military commanders of the Islamic world, Saladin. In 1183, Toron, a strategic fortification in Galilee, became the stage for one of the tensest moments of the Crusades. This video will take you straight to the heart of this epic siege, where the fate of the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem hung by a thread. And at the center of the crisis, there he was, Baldwin IV, the leper king, facing not only a devastating disease, but also the might of a rising empire. Why did Saladin decide to besiege Toron at that moment? How did Baldwin, already gravely ill, manage to organize an effective military response? And what does this confrontation reveal to us about the balance of power between Christians and Muslims in the final stretch of the 12th century? Prepare yourself for a journey marked by courage, strategy, and faith. The siege of Toron was not just a battle, it was a declaration of resistance. Stay with us until the end to discover how this seemingly forgotten fortress became a symbol of the resilience of a king on the verge of physical collapse, but never defeated in spirit. In the 12th century, the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem was a Christian enclave founded after the First Crusade, surrounded by enemies and sustained by fragile alliances. Ruled by Baldwin, a young king afflicted with leprosy, the kingdom faced a growing threat, Sultan Saladin, who had unified Egypt and Syria under the banner of Islam. The struggle for control of strategic fortresses like Toron was essential to maintaining the Christian defensive line in Galilee. Amid internal disputes among Frankish barons and the imminent Muslim offensive, the kingdom's stability relied on swift decisions and strong leaders. In the year 1183, the precarious balance between the Crusader states and Saladin's growing power reached a new point of tension. Saladin, Sultan of Egypt and Syria, decided to launch a campaign to capture strategic fortresses in Galilee, and one of them was called Toron. Located in the hills of southern Lebanon, Toron was not just a castle. It was a vital outpost for the Christian defense of Upper Galilee and the trade routes between Tyre and the interior of the kingdom. At the time, Baldwin was already suffering from the advanced effects of leprosy. His hands were deformed, his movements limited, but his mind remained sharp. Upon learning of the imminent siege, the king, still only 22 years old, did not hesitate to make a bold decision to personally gather an army and march to the aid of the besieged fortress. Saladin, in turn, believed that Baldwin's advancing illness had weakened the Christian command. Seizing the moment, he moved his forces from Damascus to Toron, assembling a coalition of Egyptian, Syrian, and Bedouin troops. His goal was clear: to take Toron quickly before any relief could arrive. To this end, he set up his camp around the fortress and began the siege with siege artillery and constant assaults on the walls. Inside Toron, the defenders were outnumbered but not outmatched in morale. Among them stood out the Knights Hospitaller and local soldiers commanded by Humphrey of Toron, Baldwin's son-in-law. Provisions were running low, but the Crusaders held on with tenacity, hoping for the rescue promised by the king. Baldwin, once again demonstrating his strategic capability, summoned his vassals, including nobles who had previously challenged him politically. The need to defend the kingdom against Saladin outweighed internal rivalries. The king assembled an army composed of Templar knights, hospitallers, local barons, and contingents from Tyre and Acre. Though ill, Baldwin insisted on leading the army in person, being carried in a litter during the march, a living symbol of authority and resistance. The arrival of Baldwin's army at the foot of the hills of Toron took Saladin by surprise. The Sultan had not expected such a swift and coordinated response. The two armies faced each other in defensive positions in a standoff that lasted for days. Saladin hesitated to engage in open battle, fearing the unfavorable terrain and the strength of the Frankish knights. Baldwin, in turn, knew that a direct confrontation could be too risky. His priority was to relieve the siege and ensure the survival of the garrison. Faced with this stalemate, Saladin chose to retreat. The arrival of the Christian army, the high morale of Toron's defenders, and the prospect of a prolonged siege during the winter forced the Sultan to abandon the field. The siege was lifted without a decisive battle, but with a clear victory for the Crusaders. Saladin's withdrawal before Toron was more than a strategic victory. It was a pivotal moment to reaffirm Baldwin's leadership and restore confidence in his ability to rule, even weakened by leprosy. The image of the king carried in a litter, overseeing troop movements and inspiring his knights, resonated with both allies and enemies. He was the living embodiment of a king who, even in physical decline, continued to embody the values of Christian chivalry, courage, faith, and responsibility toward his people. Internally, the success at Toron served as a temporary balm for the tensions that were eroding the kingdom. The regency of Count Raymond of Tripoli still divided opinions among the nobles, as did the arranged marriage between Sibylla, Baldwin's sister, and Guy of Lusignan, whose political ambition unsettled many barons. The victory against Saladin offered Baldwin a chance to rebalance the board. He used the newly regained prestige to try to calm tensions among the court factions, though he knew his medical condition would not allow him to sustain this effort for long. On the Muslim side, Saladin's retreat was seen as a minor setback, but a reminder that the conquest of the Kingdom of Jerusalem would require more than military strength. It would be necessary to undermine its internal cohesion. Saladin would continue to exploit political divisions among the Crusaders in the years to come, while strengthening his control over Syria and preparing the offensive that would later culminate in the Battle of Hattin. However, the siege of Toron had another profound effect. It showed the Christians of Europe that the Latin kingdom was still capable of resistance and was worth supporting. Chronicles that circulated in the West, such as those of William of Tyre, highlighted Baldwin's bravery and the dignity with which he faced not only the external enemy, but also his own decaying flesh. These narratives moved European princes and knights, some of whom would come on pilgrimage or as military reinforcements in the following years. The victory, however, did not erase the fact that the kingdom lived under constant threat. Baldwin knew this. Upon returning to Jerusalem, he began new efforts to organize his succession. He understood that his death was near, and that the kingdom needed stable leadership to face the inevitable return of Saladin. His plan included removing Guy of Lusignan, considered by many to be a weak and reckless leader. In his place, the king sought to form a more balanced regency council. But political divisions were already deeply rooted. Militarily, Toron held firm for a few more years, but its strategic importance waned as other fortresses also came into Saladin's sights. Even so, the episode served as a rare moment of cohesion among Eastern Christians. For the last time under Baldwin's leadership, the kingdom proved capable of resisting as a united front against an existential threat. In summary, the siege of Toron was not just a military event, it was a reflection of the resilient spirit of a king on the brink of death who refused to let his illness define his legacy. With cunning and courage, he managed to turn a moment of apparent weakness into an affirmation of political, moral, and spiritual strength. The siege of Toron revealed more than a temporary victory over Saladin's forces. It unveiled the essence of Baldwin. A king who, even condemned by a relentless disease, refused to be a spectator of his own ruin or the fall of his kingdom. His body was failing, but his will to resist remained intact. By facing Saladin not only with weapons, but with the authority of his presence, Baldwin turned the defense of Toron into a symbol of his own struggle for survival and for the unity of the Christians in Jerusalem. His leadership at that moment echoes to this day as a testament of courage in dark times. Toron stood firm, and with it, so did the hope of a people who saw in Baldwin not a martyr, but a true king. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the history of the Crusades and the impressive journey of the Leper King, leave your like, share the video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Here, history finds voice and meaning. Until the next journey, through the paths of faith, courage, and the conflicts that shaped the medieval world.